In order to get started, we need to put in our scores. Now on yours, you'll notice it's 0 through 9. I put 1 through 10. Changed up as far as the number of occurrences, so the data is a little bit different, but it's going to be done in the same manner. The first thing that you're required to do is create a tally sheet. And if you just go through and look at the number of occurrences for each of the scores and just put a tally mark in there for it, and you are done with your tally sheet. It's good to go ahead and put the number of occurrences as far as the number that's there, because you'll be using them later in formulas to make it a little bit easier to transfer everything over. Now the next part of it is you need to create a histogram, and one of the first things that you need to do on creating a histogram, and a histogram is different than a frequency distribution. If you look at the figure 4.9 on the bottom of your page 115, it shows a frequency distribution, and that is just taking whatever your actual scores are and then placing them into a chart. But to do a histogram, we need to do some groupings. And in order to group them, we need to find out cell boundaries, cell midpoints, the number of cells that we're going to use, determine range in finding that. So on page 116, whenever you look, it tells you as far as what the range is, and the range, you just take the highest number, that's 10, minus the lowest number of 1, and it gives you 9. And then you're going to take and use that to determine as far as the number of cells. Now it states on page 117 that for fewer than 100 pieces of data, use 4 to 9 cells. So that's already going to give you as far as kind of a range, and since we have 32 pieces of data, then we're kind of on the lower end of that. I ended up picking as far as 5 different cells, and using cell boundaries. One of the things the book says is better to use odd numbered cell intervals, and I would prefer that you do that, but I went ahead and picked even numbers and picked 2. It just seemed to work out better as far as the way that I had the data in here. But whenever you pick the cell boundaries, you're going to pick as far as, if I'm picking 2, then it's actually from 0.5 up to 2.5. Whenever I analyzed that, I looked as far as cell midpoints and picked halfway in between, to where as far as like 1 and 2 would be in its own group, and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. In order to get halfway in between, well, halfway between 2 and 3 is 2.5, so that's what my cell boundary is there. Halfway between 4 and 5 is 4.5. 6 and 7 is 6.5, and then your 8 and 9 is 9.5, and then you have to extend your 0.5 both in both directions, so you have to go to 0.5 and 10.5 as well, so that you get the full 2 points on each one of them. If you would have gone with 3, then it would have only been 3 different groupings that are in here, and it says better to use 4 to 9, so that's why I stayed with that to get 5 out of it. Now whenever you look as far as your cell midpoints, halfway between 0.5 and 0.25 is 1.5, and you have 3.5, 5.5, 7.5, and 9.5. Now on our first part, it asks for creating a histogram. Now once we have this and we figured out our cell boundaries and our cell midpoints, then we can determine the frequency for each one of our groups. So if you look in here for your group 1, where you have your midpoint of, where you have your cell boundaries of 0.5 to 2.5, then you have these first 2 groupings because they were a score of 1 and a score of 2, which falls in between there. And you add 3 and 3 together, you get 6. The next ones, you add 1 and 3 together, you have 4. 3 and 5, you have 8. 6 and 5, you have. And I had a problem with one of mine because I multiplied instead of adding, and you have 3 and 3, and you have 6. Now, once that is done and you end up as far as with your frequencies, now you need to put them into a chart. And whenever we looked at it before, we were able to see as far as being able to select more than one data. And I have already set up the charts in here. We have as far as our score frequency. But whenever you go to create this chart, if you'll take and highlight the information that you want to use, and what information do we want to use? Well, we want to use the scores, and we want to use as far as the frequency, how they occur, and then we have as far as our cell midpoints. So anytime that you want to select, if you want to select any data that's separated from each other, you can highlight and then hold down on control and highlight another one. Now we could have done that with both of these together. I'm going to go in here and show you as far as ways to go and change it once you have your chart set up. But you highlight your data, go in, you insert, pick the type of chart that you want, and create your chart. So if we were to take this one and highlight it, take this one and highlight it as well, and then we insert the chart that we want, and it's going to give us some information. Now it's a little unusual because we have two different series that are in here, and we have to determine as far as what information is going on. But let me show you what data that we have. Whenever we select the data, and I have series 1 that's here. Now series 1 is not displayed. It would look a little bit different if I had it displayed, but we're using series 1 data in there but not displaying it. Another thing is, whenever you do your histograms, you don't need spaces. If you look in your book, all of the different cells are touching each other. You need to have all your bars in your graph all touching, no gaps in between. So as far as the data that we're going to use, we've got the series 2 data here. I'm going to take and edit it, and if you see where it's selected, we have right here as far as our frequency. If we looked at this series 1 that's right here, and what information that we have all of our scores that are here. And then we have as far as the number of occurrences, and took and put that in on the side. Changing colors and all, if you want to, you can highlight, format the series. There's different options here. Now I'm showing you how to do it in Excel. If you have any other program, something in Mac or whatever, and that's perfectly fine to use, as long as you end up as far as with your charts where they match. Now we looked at the it as far as doing our chart to start with, creating our histogram just using our frequency information. Then the next part is doing a relative frequency distribution and doing a proper histogram. Relative frequency is as far as a percentage, and I have a formula in here to where I take the cell that I'm on divided by the total that's here. And one of the things that I do is, whenever you don't want the cell to change as you move along, you can put a $sign. So it's $G, $7 to pick this particular cell, so that each time whenever I copy and paste, it changes to the next cell beside it here, but it doesn't change to the one as far as our divisor there where we're dividing it. Now, relative frequency is whenever it gets down to total, the total should be 100%. Whenever you do your histogram, now your histogram on your regular as far as your frequency is going to look real similar to your relative frequency, except you're going to have percentages in it instead of number of occurrences. The next part is a cumulative frequency, and cumulative frequency, you start with your frequency 6, 4 is 10, and then you had 10 plus 8 is 18, and so on and so forth until you get down to your total of 35. Whenever you do it, instead of having a graph that looks like this or a histogram that looks like this, it's going to be relative and it's going to build each time. Whenever you do a relative cumulative frequency, you're using the same information just like you did a frequency and then did relative frequency. You're using a cumulative frequency and then you're relating it in percentage, and whenever you get to the last one, it should be 100%. And on your chart, you're going to have number of occurrences as far as your percentage on your left, and then you had on your cumulative frequency your number of occurrences that were on here, and then accumulated as it went along. I'm going to take and post this video like I did the other ones before and provide a link for you. And if you have any questions, please post it to the discussion board, or you can send it to my email at skaemerling, it's SKAEMMERLING @ uttyler.edu.